Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. I am Tasneem Amatullah, Assistant Professor of Educational Leadership at the Emirates College for Advanced Education in the UAE. As is the theme of this conference, we are aware that Muslim women play a major role in the workforce in the Middle East and North Africa region. Women hold diverse positions, from political leaders to senior leaders to educators, doctors, engineers, and many more. But yet, in many parts of the world, Muslim women are perceived as oppressed because of the negative cultural stereotypes that are embedded in the society and that which are often reiterated in the media. In this presentation, I share a counter-narrative, an empowering narrative of a female Muslim leader in higher education context in Qatar. I examine the educational leadership experiences of a female leader in Qatar in the field of higher education and the ways she maneuvers her leadership role in the light of Islamic leadership theory and practice. The central guiding question used for this study is, how does a female educational leader narrate her leadership experience in higher education in Qatar? Considering the unique landscape of Qatar, a nation which is deeply rooted in Islamic values and Sharia serves as its legislative law, Qatar stands as a progressive example of practicing Islam, particularly within its education system. In Qatar, the education system takes an innovative approach by integrating Islamic values and teachings into the curriculum while simultaneously nurturing critical thinking and preparing students for the workforce. The Ministry of Education in Qatar oversees both the K-12 and higher education system. Qatar National Vision 2030 is very much aligned with the education system, where they are aiming to develop and sustain the human capacity in the nation so the economic workforce, the prosperity happens, and then the nation actually moves to a knowledge-based economy. Education leadership actually stands out as one of the fields where Qatari women have made significant impact. Now, in this context, when I delve into the narrative of a female Qatari educational leader in higher education, exploring how she basically navigates her leadership role. Qatar's unique blend of Islamic values and progressive education initiatives combined with this evolving role of women in leadership provides a very fascinating backdrop for my exploration of educational leadership in the Middle East. Now, this study highlights the dynamic and evolving landscape of leadership in Qatar, with a particular focus on the contributions of female leaders in the educational sphere. With Islamic leadership framework as the theoretical framework of my study, it is vital to explore and understand the dimensions of Islamic leadership. As you know, the literature is really scarce, but often Muslim nations resort to adopting Western leadership theories because it is definitely, much researched about, much written about. But also at the same time, we don't have much written about Islamic leadership insights. However, the Islamic leadership literature is actually growing rapidly, and scholars have been studying in different contexts and from a wide variety of perspectives these days. It includes culturally relevant leadership, spiritual leadership, educational leadership stories of Muslim women, the school culture, Muslim identity, Islamic school leadership and social justice, women's narratives around gender and stereotypes, and much more. Even introduced recently a balanced leadership model from an Islamic perspective. So as I was reading through the literature, two definitions I draw from for my study is that first comes from Rost, an educational leadership scholar, where he says educational leadership is a dynamic interaction between the leaders, followers, and situations. And the second one is that from Bikun and Bababi, that Islamic leadership is considered as a sacred trust and amana, reflecting a commitment to guide, protect, and treat followers justly. So Islamic leadership basically draws inspiration from the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, echoing a dual nature that balances the rights of God over humanity, huquq Allah, and the rights of humanity over each other, huquq al-abad. Scholars have derived various theories and frameworks based on Islamic perspectives, such as Padela's Islamic educational leadership theory and practice. Now, this comprehensive framework aligns with the teachings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, providing valuable insights for educational leaders. What Padella did was that, using a grounded theory approach, he reveals that Islamic leadership comprises of two core categories. So the first one is modeling and directing behaviors and motivating followers towards a theocentric worldview. Now, these categories, the first one unfolds as personal leadership, the relationship with God and humanity, how to treat people, how to be adaptive based on the follower potential, and so on. Whereas the second category within Padella's framework developed the purpose of crafting an Islamic educational leadership model. So originally designed, this framework was designed in the context of K through 12 schools in the US, but this model definitely has scope to actually be adapted in the domain of higher education, as is done in this study. In the second category, two distinct themes were derived, and the first one focused on fidelity to God and his prophet. The themes emphasized active reflection, how we have to be an unwavering belief in the life after death, serving as the core properties of cultivating a theocentric worldview. The driving force between these themes is a constant reminder that a leader remains accountable to God for every action and decision, not just in the present, but here in the hereafter as well. The second theme underscores the importance of nurturing a faith-based identity. This involves serving the Ummah, maintaining familial ties, demonstrating social responsibility, and definitely avoiding harm to others through one's actions. Now, this again reinforces that Islamic educational leadership theory offers insights to reshape educational practices, fostering collaboration among all stakeholders. In order to carry out my study, the methodological approach that I took was an interpretivist discourse, and I utilized narrative inquiry as the method. Interpretivist because I wanted to understand their perspectives in their own words, and this was well documented by Clandon and Connolly by the use of narrative inquiry, and especially when it comes to educational stories. A way to understand experience, Clandon and Connolly say that it is through the telling of stories. And this is what I have used in my study. And narrative inquiry basically helps us to understand the lived stories and the told stories. So I was more interested in how the leaders narrate their own stories rather than me interpreting or making sense of what they are saying. So I wanted to capture their own way of telling their own stories. In order to do that, I conducted 3 60-minute interviews with the school leaders, and then I also observed the leader in her setting, which helped me construct detailed stories of her lived experiences. The different probes or questions that I used in a semi-structured interviews were: how do you define educational leadership? What is the influence of your local context, the Qatari context itself as you lead? How do you do decision-making? What is your specific leadership style, if you have any? Can you give me some examples of being a female leader, complementary experiences, challenging experiences, and what does it feel like to be a female leader in higher education? So this led me to develop a very good narrative of a leader whom I call her as Aisha, and her entire narrative, entire story became to be a very reflected Aisha as a critical, reflexive leader. So what Aisha said, I actually had the privilege of engaging in in-depth interviews with Aisha, and she was working in an international education and research platform institution while also teaching in higher education. So during the course of her discussions, Aisha shared her thoughts on leadership, and she emphasized that leadership is a very complex concept with various components. She believes that leadership involves guiding a team, setting a clear direction, having a vision, providing resources to bring that vision to life, and fostering collaboration within the team. Aisha's view on leadership is not, really based on the literature, but she derives it from her practical experiences. And then she said, it's more about us rather than me as a leader. One critical element Aisha highlighted in her leadership style is decision making. She sees decision making as a collaborative process aiming to empower her team members to make decisions, let it be big or small. Rather than providing answers, she prompts her team with questions, encouraging them to think critically and strategically. Now, this approach not only empowers her team, but also fosters team building. Now, Aisha also candidly discussed the challenges she faced as a female leader. She expressed her concerns that, about the job market, where highly qualified women in this context, like herself, are often offered positions that do not match her expertise and qualifications. So Aisha did acknowledge, the complexities of gender-related challenges in the workforce slightly, but although she said, being a female leader is tough, she acknowledged that Qatar as a nation has supported women in a lot in the recent years, especially for higher education, pursuing further studies and so on. Moreover, Aisha shared, her experiences of how she balanced her leadership role with the familial responsibilities. Aisha stressed that, when it comes to Islamic context, the focus is basically on what is permissible halal and what is prohibited haram, with an emphasis on right or wrong. While she actually recognized that leadership examples from the history of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she also pointed out that she practices leadership from a wider spectrum of sources, given that what she has been exposed to, what she has read, and so on. So Aisha's heartfelt reflections, revealed that the complexity of identifying the source of her leadership style, it is very difficult to draw a line between the Islamic and the Western influences, is what she was confessing. But she also expressed a disappointment that there is lack of reflection and connection to Islamic traditions in contemporary leadership practices. She argued that Western leadership theories have really been dominant for so long that they have become so deeply ingrained in our daily practices, overshadowing the potential contributions of the Islamic leadership context. She then said, the missing part is that we don't reflect or we don't relate to it in our own tradition. She emphasized that the research culture in her part of the world is still developing and that bridging the gap between Western and Islamic leadership theories could be a significant contribution. Aisha shed light, her reflections that leadership does not occur in isolation, but it is deeply intertwined with the individual she leads, the tasks at hand, and the timing of these endeavors. She illustrated how the competence of her team members plays a crucial role in shaping her leadership experiences. Aisha also emphasized that leadership is fundamentally a social activity, asserting that it does not exist in a vacuum. Leadership, she said, is a process of giving and taking. It is influenced by the people involved and the specific circumstances. So this perspective really reflected the socio-cultural nature of leadership, where interactions, communication, and mutual understanding are essential. When it comes to, the Islam and the culture, Aisha was very clear and said, we basically have more cultural influences rather than Islam here itself. So Islam on its own does not, discriminate between different genders, but it is more of a cultural influence that has been ingrained in the society. And culture basically operates under the disguise of Islam, whereas Islam empowers and supports me in my leadership role, is what Aisha was saying. In the final prompt, where what does Aisha feel like, as a female in the higher education context? Aisha said it is basically the importance of leading in the context of higher education, especially in her role. She approaches her position by emphasizing the teaching values and principles, making her sessions more engaging and interactive. And she said, she leads by driving the discussions, shaping the course material, and managing time effectively to meet students' expectations. So all of this story of Aisha, the narrative of Aisha, is very well overlapping with the Fadila's Islamic leadership theory and practice. So here you can very well see that through the different examples I have stated, that Aisha has been a very visionary leader. She was delegating tasks, she was responsible, empowering, she believed in, adaptive leadership, uplifting the follower capacity. And The concept of halal and haram was in her leadership practices. She was more into a collaborative and community-based leadership. So Aisha's leadership style embraces Islamic values, emphasizing the intention, the in-depth practices, and the way she communicates and behaves. She emphasizes the need to align these with the Islamic practices, right? So then, in addition to her story, another few more themes that came to light were the supports and challenges. So the support system, she did agree that, the family has been a very strong support. The supervisors, while pursuing her doctoral studies and higher education, have been very supportive. Now, Qatar as a nation itself has been very supportive. But the challenges, on the other hand, has been the workload when it comes to balancing family and work and additional work at her workplace, but also the challenges was the misinterpretation of Islam against the backdrop of the culture. So the implications of my study are basically in the three dimensions. One is for the leaders, the other one is professional development for organizers, and the third one is for research. So the leaders, the impact of this study extends far beyond just the female leaders because it encompasses leaders of all genders across the globe. Leadership is an evolving and intricate phenomenon, so recognizing the importance of incorporating the cultural and religious heritage into leadership practices is essential. So if we could follow the teachings of Quran and Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for Muslim educational leaders, it would be great and ultimately, building that connection between faith and leadership and enhancing the effectiveness of their leadership roles. For the professional development, basically, Qatar hosts, several professional development programs for educational leaders. So it is crucial for organizers to design and develop such programs, keeping the context in mind and integrating the Islamic leadership framework into their curriculum. For research, well, this study actually is focusing on one leader's narratives. There is a lot of potential for broader research to be carried out in understanding the leadership experiences of several more female leaders. And this research basically presents a strong contribution, not only in advancing the understanding of Islamic leadership in educational context, but also in its applicability to leaders worldwide. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much.